Hello, my name is ScienceBeard, and recently I haven't had much time to do scripted videos, so this is going to be unscripted. So excuse any jump cuts, particularly because I'm probably going to swear a lot and I don't want to swear on camera. I just don't like it. I think it's funny when other people do it. For me, it's just I'm too old. Can't get away with it. So what I want to look at in particular is having been a teacher and still passionate about teaching and thinking about rejoining the profession after a little bit of a break. I want to talk about a development in teacher training, which has basically been that the government has stipulated that in teacher training you're not supposed to use any information produced by a organization which purports to be anti-capitalist. Okay, so and at the same time, of course, they want freedom of speech and they want unfettered, excellence in critical thinking from the students, except they don't, of course, which we know. So to square that circle, they've basically said, well, if you're anti-capitalist, then you're anti-British values. Okay, so let's have a look. So one of the organizations that I found that have it written into their DNA, if you like, are Black Lives Matter. And here is an absolute example of the shoddy and just frankly awful thinking that goes into something like this. So Tom Goodenough writes in the Spectator, revealed what Black Lives Matter really stands for. And let's have a look. So anyone worth listening to agrees that Black Lives Matter. But what does the organization Black Lives Matter stand for? Worryingly, for the 34,000 Brits who have topped up BLM's UK's coffers with over 1 million in recent weeks, finding out is no easy task. Except, of course, that when you go to their GoFundMe site, which he links to, it is written in black and white. So, pardon the expression. So you can find out really easily. Okay, so he writes from a point of view of what do they want to do? So okay, let's look at this and let's see how well his observations stand up to reality. I would say BLM wants to dismantle capitalism. Now, it's interesting. English is not my first language, but I are rather good at English, I think. And let's look at the word dismantle. Okay, so if your car, you've got a car that you loved. That you've loved for 20 years, if that breaks down and you take it to the mechanic and you say, can you fix it? And he says, well, I can, but I'm going to have to take it apart, dismantle it, in other words, and then take out all the bits that don't work, replace them, and then put it back together again. That is not destroy. You wouldn't then go and say, stop destroying my car, you monster. No, of course not. So dismantling capitalism. Let's have a look. He's got a link to the fundraiser, and there we are. You can click on more, blah, blah, blah. We're guided by a commitment to dismantle imperialism, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and the state structures that disproportionately harm black people in Britain and around the world. Now, if dismantling these is wrong, if my understanding of the word dismantling is wrong, then they should really have put something else in place. They don't want to destroy capitalism and burn it down completely. What they are saying, and particularly if you read just a few sentences further, is they want to dismantle those mechanisms that disproportionately harm black and minority people, which we'll get to further down in society. So there we go. So it's obviously difficult to express one idea in just one paragraph. So dismantling something is not necessarily destructive if you then rebuild it in a way that is better than it was before. Okay, so De Bruyne is a footballer and he's paid 350,000 a week. It's unlikely he would fare as well without capitalism. Well, but isn't that a good example of how capitalism doesn't work for society? Because a footballer, I know that people are passionate about it and they obviously spend a lot of money on it. Are we saying that in society we should worship footballers to the extent that they earn more than anyone else? Now, firstly, if you spend money on football, that's absolutely fine. And football is one of the really ableist things in society where you can say, if you're a shit footballer, you can't earn that. Sorry, sworn. If you're a bad footballer, you can't really earn that amount of money. Fair enough. And lots of working class people and minority people have a much better chance at hitting it big in football, which is still only a handful of people, than in normal society. And that should tell you something. It should tell you something that normal society isn't geared up to give everybody a fair shake of success, basically. And there we are. Okay. Whew. Okay. BLM says climate change is racist. Now, he picks that out in order to make it sound ridiculous. But here's the thing. The people who do not want to address climate change are the ones who are really well off. Who's well off? Well, basically, it's the majority white nations in the world that are actually have the resources, financially and otherwise, to maybe combat climate change. Whereas if you are in a poorer nation, then you won't necessarily have the resources. Now, Europe and the Western industrialized world have played a part in keeping certain nations poor. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. You can absolutely disagree with it. Wherever we are with our understanding of how all of that happened, one of the problems is that there are a lot of Asian and African nations and not Western industrialized nations that do not have the resources to combat climate change on quite the same scale as Europe and North America have. So that and if it is a worldwide problem, and if we are not ready to combat it, then of course who's going to suffer most, right? So I'm going to leave that there. BLM wants to abolish prisons. Well, this is a really facile thing to actually say. So we're going to follow the link. Okay, so here we go. Conditions inside Britain's prison. By the way, I haven't read this before, so I've not clicked on all the links, but I'm just going to follow them and see what it says here. Conditions inside Britain's prisons are inhumane, overcrowded, and unsafe. Prisons and detention centres should be abolished. As a German, I can only tell you that I agree with that. In Germany, if you go to prison, the thing that you really miss isn't a bar of soap or privacy or good food. It is your freedom. It is a deprivation of your freedom. You're not allowed to go anywhere. Now, how many people are imprisoned in Germany? Far fewer than in the UK. So, does prison solve society's problems in the UK? No. So there must be an alternative. So here somebody says, what's the alternative? One alternative is investment in communities and in root societal problems that lead to crime and discriminatory incarceration. Why are they saying this? Because far more minority people end up in prison than white people do. So there we are. So I'm not going to go any further than that. But this is another thing where he said, abolish prisons. Because white people who commit tax fraud are incredibly unlikely to actually end up in prison. There are some, and it makes the headlines. When has it ever made a headline that somebody from a minority population going into prison? When has that ever made a headline? It makes a headline when they die in prison or in police custody, maybe. But there we are. Okay. BLM wants to get rid of borders. Now, apparently that's the government's stance as well with Brexit. Because in order to let food in without holding it up, you have to let everything in. Because we haven't got the facilities to check the borders. Britain has always been in charge of its borders when it came to immigration. If you don't believe me, I'll link some articles. You can look at it there. So, open borders. What are they saying? Climate crisis, a racist crisis, cut emissions, open borders. So, the idea that we have to keep people out is a ridiculous idea. That doesn't solve the problems. I'm not an advocate for letting anyone go to any country, but I would like to see more freedom. This is what we're talking about. The people who are supposed to be for personal freedom want to shut borders down. They're not shutting. Brexit has led to the biggest loss of personal freedom in the UK in several generations. Because at the moment, you can go to France and you can work there. You can go to Germany. You can go to Italy. After December, you have to have all sorts of permits. We are going to be a third country in the UK. That means you have to have all the paperwork in place, and you can easily be denied. Now, the people who are actually going to move, I suspect, will be very welcome in those countries for a number of reasons. But I'm not even going to go there. So this is just made to sound ridiculous. But when you actually go at the substance of it, and look, there's one sentence, and that just sort of doesn't even analyze anything. It's just there to make white people who read The Spectator feel comfortable and justified that somehow Black Lives Matter is somehow evil. Except there's no analysis to say that. And there's no further discussion of what they're actually saying. BLM says unemployment is violence. Now, this is again, for those white folk, and me included, I can go down a street and look policemen in the eye and even go, "Oi, how's it going?" I can do that. I wouldn't be so comfortable, maybe, if I was a minority, because I've listened to people saying that they can't do this without maybe getting stopped and searched. So I think the closest I've ever come to suggesting anything is like, okay, get some cannabis in your pocket, let it half hang out of your pocket, and then walk down a high street. That's how most of the minorities probably feel. You know? They feel like they've done something wrong when they really haven't done anything wrong, but they're more likely to be stopped and searched. And that is a form of violence, because it isn't... There was recently a story, and I'll link that as well, of a barrister who got stopped several times a day and was mistaken for the help, for a defendant, for like she didn't belong there. Members of the members of the people who were watching the trial would say, "You shouldn't be in here." Really? Would that not affect you if day in, day out, you were a highly skilled professional and you got these reactions? I'm going to link that. BLM condemns stop and search. Yes, because stop and search is a thing that affects mostly minority people. And when you start looking at who carries knives and who carries cannabis, and you stop looking at white people who do that and drugs, and you start picking on minorities, you're going to find more minorities have cannabis in their pockets. Of course. If you started looking at and Peter Hitchens, who I normally pick on, is sort of against cannabis and marijuana, how many cops are going up and down Oxford and Cambridge and pick up white students who've got cannabis in their pocket? And how many of them get a criminal record? I doubt that it's very many at all. But I can guarantee you that cannabis is being consumed there. BLM wants to get rid of the police, and it's the same thing. In the US, it's defund the... Sorry, I've actually stopped looking at the links, but I shall do that for here. So they want to defund the police in the US. And what that basically means is, if there's a mentally ill person roaming the streets, do you really need the cops to come? Or would a social worker be better in that place? What it means is that the investment is there for appropriate personnel to deal with stuff. At the moment, you've got a choice between the ambulance, the fire service, and the police. And that is not a great choice. There should be far more different choices for our complex society than that. Is your house on fire? Fine. Okay, call the fire brigade. Has somebody suffered an injury? Fine, send the ambulance. But what do you do if there is a mentally ill patient and the ambulance service, well, we can't do anything unless they've injured someone or themselves or are a threat to someone. And if they're just shouting at 3 o'clock in the morning, call the police, right? And in the UK, we're not at the same level as in the US. But then again, here's the thing. If you're a black person or a minority ethnic person, is your experience of the police the same as if you're white? And for me, I can say no. I'm white. And I've been stopped under circumstances where I've no doubt I would have been treated very differently. How do I know that? Because I've read accounts of people who got stopped under these circumstances. I felt bad. Because, it is not my feeling though. I felt bad because I thought, actually, the police should have nicked me. And should have gone, you are a stupid sod, right? Riding your bike drunk. And they sort of gave me a slap on the wrist and let me go. Right? This was when I was a fair bit younger. But, they could have given me a breathalyzer test, and I didn't have a car at the time. But, it could have all counted against me. Now, I've read accounts of minority and black people who have had these experiences. And they ended up in a completely different place. So, there we are. Okay, so... BLM says the government appointment of a Pakistani heritage woman is racist. Munira Mirza is something of a great British success story. Why is she a success story according to Goodenough? Because she's a working class northerner of Pakistani heritage who was the only pupil in the sixth form to win a place at Oxford. And that is good. I mean, it's good for Munira Mirza. I applaud that. Fantastic. Shouldn't there be lots and lots of Munira Mirzas coming from the northeast, from the working class? Because they are not less able, not less intelligent. And shouldn't there be more minority people at those white-dominated institutions? Absolutely. What we're doing is we're squandering potential. Okay? And that this is not something that the minorities brought on themselves. So if the outcome, there are charities and there are organizations that have been, like the Sutton Trust, who have been working for decades to fix that, not fix it, but at least address that issue. And that's been going on without Black Lives Matter. Are they all wrong? And we have an open society where everybody can just reach their potential? BLM condemned the suffragettes. This is, I don't even need to read it. I know where they're going. Okay? The suffragettes were mostly white women. And they're mostly white women of a higher status. And that's what we remember, at least. Actually, there are lots of working class people. Let's have a look at the tweet. Oh. Okay, so despite what you might have learned at school, many suffragettes were also working to advance white power. Now, there's an example from the US. Oregon, Utah, is that Colorado, maybe? That's fine. That doesn't apply to the UK, so we need to localize it. But maybe there's something in it, because the way that it worked was that women didn't universally get the vote. Men didn't either. It took until 1927 until people generally got the vote. Right? 1927. That's not even 100 years ago. Will we celebrate that in 7 years? I hope so. But there we are. Okay. But there we are. Okay, BLM said Churchill is staunchly a racist. This is one of my favorites. Yes, he was. Without Churchill, it seems all but certain would have lost the war to Nazi Germany. Is it fair to describe him as racist? Churchill race row. Was Winston Churchill racist? Why some people have accused the wartime prime minister of racism. Now, I taught in secondary school. I taught science. I'm a science teacher. But I have... also an interest in history for a number of reasons. And I have to say, I was shocked by this because I didn't know that. I mean, my history education focused mainly on Germany during the Second World War for a number of reasons. So let's have a look. Why have some people accused Winston Churchill of being a racist? There are people both now and during his lifetime who found Winston Churchill's views on race and ethnicity alarming. As an MP who showed a very imperial mindset in his desire to conquer more nations based on his belief that the Aryan stock is bound to triumph. Okay? That's what he said. And in 1937 he told the Palestine Royal Commission no great wrong had been done to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia, according to the BBC. Prime Minister Stephen Baldwin was warned not to appoint him to cabinet because his views were so old-fashioned, with even Churchill's doctor saying Winston thinks only of the colour of their skin. So, you can dig deeper into that. You can also look at what happened in India. So we're all about free speech in this country, hopefully still. And we want to know the good things as well as the bad things so that we can have a fully rounded picture. There's no sense in hero worshipping anyone. Okay? Otherwise you can't have a wholesome debate. You know? Okay. In 1937, he told the Palestine Royal Commission, I do not admit, for instance, that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indian. Okay, we've got that one. Poison gas. Churchill has been criticized for advocating the use of chemical weapons primarily against Kurds and Afghans. I cannot understand the squeamishness about the use of gas. I'm strongly in favor of using poison gas against uncivilized tribes. So not at all racist then. The Bengal famine. That's actually the thing I was going for. In 1943, India, then still a British possession, experienced a disastrous famine in the northeastern region of Bengal, sparked by the Japanese occupation of Burma the year before. At least 3 million people are believed to have died, and Churchill's actions, or lack thereof, have been subject to criticism. So, I'm sorry about reading that name because I'm probably going to get it wrong. Majusri Mukiyi. I'm going to try and do that better. Madhusri Mukherjee, author of Churchill's Secret War, has said that despite refusing to meet India's need for wheat, he continued to insist that it exported rice to fuel the war effort. So he took food literally away from them. Churchill even appeared to blame the Indians for the famine, claiming they breed like rabbits. Far-sighted and prophetic instead. He's running a global war at this point, and there are always going to be conflicting priorities and demands. He says it's an incredibly complex and evolving situation, and he's not always going to get everything right. However, if you want to argue that he wasn't racist, I think you're on really, really shaky grounds there. Statements about Gandhi, essentially, I'm looking for it. Churchill was terribly alarmed that giving the Indians home rule was going to lead to the downfall of the British Empire and the end of civilization. Okay? So, white supremacy, right? People sometimes question why on earth did people not listen to Churchill's warnings about Hitler in the late 1930s, says Charmley. To which the short answer is that he'd used exactly the same language about Gandhi in the 1930s. Okay. I'll leave that. There's more attitudes towards Jews and so on. I'm not even going to go through all of that. Okay. So, what does Goodenough say? Without Churchill, it seems all but certain that we would have lost to Nazi Germany, and yet, while Churchill was clearly no saint, it is fair to describe him as staunchly racist. Yes, it is fair. He was a racist. And then Black Lives Matter describes big charities as colonizers. So I don't know enough about this point. But at this point, I've talked about 10 points. And what can I say? Good enough just isn't good enough. There you go. If you dig just a little bit deeper, if you actually click on the links and read what it says on those sides, if you do this with an open mind, and not one that's been pre-spectated, basically, to make you feel uncomfortable about Black Lives Matter. What the government now wants is no Black Lives Matter material should be used in teacher training and by extrapolation in schools. And it's a covert curbing of freedom of speech. So even with 16-year-olds who see Black Lives Matter's protests, they will not be able to ask questions in school. And I think that is detrimental to freedom of speech and to an education. Nobody forces teachers to say Black Lives Matter is great and we should all support it. Nobody does. If they want to criticize Black Lives Matter, they are free to do that. If they want to say some words of support, they're free to do that. Well, they were until the government stepped in and said you mustn't ever use anything related to Black Lives Matter, by virtue of them wanting to dismantle capitalism. And the other thing that really annoys the crap out of me is the fact that dismantling does not mean destroy, abolish, burn down to the ground. It doesn't. Look it up in the dictionary. In fact, tell you what, Google, define dismantle. Take a machine or structure to pieces. What do you do with the pieces then? You put them back together. Right? The engines were dismantled and the bits piled into a heap. They were dismantled and then you can put them back together. It's not abolish. Abolish is... I can't believe I'm having to do this, but for my own sanity, formally puts an end to a system, practice or institution. That is completely different. Completely different. And I would say the DFE, the Department for Education, needs to go back to school and learn some words, or at least look them up. Okay, this is all from me. I'll see you in the next video, if I've not exploded from anger. There you go.